Hey everyone, welcome to another product deep dive for Sounds Profitable. I'm really excited to have Robert Minnix, product manager of StreamGuys here to go over their product, SG Recast. Robert, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. We enjoy their Sounds Profitable podcast and everything you've been doing.
That means a lot to me. I really like adtech that is complementary to so many different things here. And, you know, when you guys reached out to talk about this, it was really exciting because SG Recast is a component of a much bigger thing that is StreamGuys. And you guys offer so many different things, hosting and ad serving and all of that. But a lot of your things are built in modules, and SG Recast specifically, and I'd like you to elaborate on this a little bit more, is about taking streaming radio and turning it into a podcast as efficiently and automatedly as possible. Is that accurate?
Very much so, yeah.
Awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about SG Recast? Anything that I didn't touch on there, any of the goals with it, and then let's dive into how someone would use it.
Sure. Yeah, so SG Recast for about 6 years now has been our solution for radio broadcasters who have been trying to get into the digital space to expand their content offerings and try to better get access to things like podcasting or even just reusing their own content in some way that will benefit their audience. In general, SG Recast focuses heavily on live streaming and taking that stream and turning it into something like a podcast or allowing the broadcaster to do something specific with their recorded audio as per a few use cases that the broadcast industry is specifically concerned with. But even outside of broadcasting, we of course do have general podcasting support for those who are direct uploading content or who don't necessarily have as large of a streaming footprint and might have some manual work that they still do. But Recast fills any gap that it can. And for, I think I mentioned that 6 years, has basically evolved from a very basic product to a very advanced and complicated sort of enterprise level product, and some of the components therein for handling both large and small organizations. So what I'll focus on mostly today is how we empower those larger broadcasters especially to automate their content production and their workflows, and then how SG Recast fits into that portion of what they do.
That's very cool. I mean, like, I think when I talk to the Sounds Profitable audience, the big thing that I try and emphasize is that, you know, we have to realize that a lot of the people in our space don't know other digital advertising avenues. But just as much, the podcasting space is so quickly growing, and we're seeing so much young and new talent that many of them, myself included, have zero broadcast experience, right? Even streaming is something that I don't have direct experience on. So when you guys came to me and asked if you could do a product deep dive, I was super excited because there were intricacies of streaming and broadcast audio that I think make it the perfect sense to port it over into podcasting. And this tool, when we did the earlier walkthrough and excited to go through it again now, I mean, like, it's a great way to take and reuse the content, which is such a critical thing to do. Putting out one newsletter a week, 2 podcasts a week, and this deep dive once a month is a lot of work. Being able to repurpose and reuse your content and get the most longevity out of it, critical to success for any media company. So, you know, enough fanboying on my end about like the ability to reuse content. Let's dive into this. So we're looking at the dashboard here, right?
Yeah, so this is the main dashboard for the SG Recast section of our platform. We sort of separate the sort of main functionality of what you can do from, say, user management. So there's 2 separate sections for that. So this is the section of our platform focused only on the functionality of content and content repurposement. So you can see here we give general overviews. The dashboards are customizable for our users if they need them to, depending on the specific roles or uses that a particular user in their system might need. But generally, most of our users will have access to the wider set of things in the system. That's all sort of based on roles and permissions, but depending on even that, certain dashboards might need to have modifications made to them based on a particular producer's needs or elsewise. But within our system, there are sort of 2 major ways that a broadcaster enables content repurposement. And that generally boils down to one of 2 things, whether or not they have known scheduling for their shows. So say they have shows Monday, Wednesday, Friday every week, and they know the exact times that those will happen. They can purposefully record those sections of time. But the more powerful and more sort of enterprise level and automated way of doing that is basing things off of metadata. Since live streaming does include metadata, and that may or may not include now playing information if you're doing music, for example, but often also includes a lot of additional information that we can use to properly target and record information for our clients. So maybe that's show metadata, maybe that's ad break metadata, and we can take all of that and sort of programmatically allow them an easy way to turn that into a new podcast. So let me quickly go to our audio logger section of the system, and I can explain what audio loggers do from a sort of general overview, and then describe what it is that audio loggers can do for a broadcaster. So audio loggers are the mechanism by which SG Recast can take a live stream and basically record it in perpetuity as long as you want it to, and it will keep a sort of recorded buffer of that live stream and then allow the broadcaster to make use of any of the audio within that buffer as they see fit. So maybe they want to keep the most 36 recent hours of their audio available, and they need to go in and export a specific show, or they need to go in and export a specific highlight, or there was a particularly juicy story that happened during a news segment that they wanted to go back and export, and they wouldn't necessarily have been able to do that if they weren't logging that audio themselves in their station. And our tool can provide for that. But because we're also constantly listening to that live stream, we're constantly recording the metadata from that live stream. And then we can, via our audio logger tool, do a number of things that allow our clients to leverage their own metadata to automatically produce and reuse their content. So if I go to our demo here, and I go ahead and I access the publishing state for it, and then go to that, we will see it's for the most part a very heavy configuration interface, since the goal is to set it and forget it as much as possible. So when you're using these tools, you're basically providing whatever sort of system metadata you need to for identifying it and managing it on the back end. And then, of course, what stream it is that you want to record and how you want us to go about doing that recording buffer.
Real quick here. So I have a stream, and I have the URL for the stream. And what we're doing is I'm taking this URL and I'm providing in here, and I'm determining a window of how much of a buffer I would like you guys to hold on to.
Correct.
And so that's going to store it automatically. And included in that is not only the audio, but associated in the exact time frame, as if I was listening to it live, is the metadata that's coming through. And
Correct.
In that metadata would include things like the image artwork, the identifications, the people speaking, all these different things, right? Like what are some examples of the metadata that's important in a stream?
So in a stream, most often you have a sort of bifurcation between two separate sets of metadata. The one is the sort of client-facing, what you might see if you're listening in a player or on a website, the now playing information for that stream, whether that's the current name of the program that you're listening to, or if it's a music station and it's the current actual music that's playing, that kind of information. That can include the album artwork, the artist title album, the name of the program, whatever the sort of generic information is that a client might want, a broadcaster might want their end user, their audience to see. The separate piece of metadata is what we'll refer to as the control metadata. So this is just either programmatic or automated information that's inserted by their automation systems in their studio that are actually producing the audio for the stream before it gets to us. And that information can include indicators of whether or not it's currently in an ad break, or what kind of a segment they're currently producing, or extraneous information that we can key off of to do automated workflows. Most often those will be things like the ad break triggers and whether or not there's a particular version of what this content is. Maybe they have indicators so they know what their talk segments are versus what their music segments are, and then we can target or exclude content based on that. But those are sort of the two main ideas that are relevant in streaming metadata.
Gotcha. So I guess my question there is there, having no streaming background there, is there a framework that every piece of technology folds all the metadata into for both sides of those? Or is it unique per publisher? Like if me and you both had our own streams, even using the same software, might I identify it differently than you? Or is it more an industry norm?
There's certainly a lot of, let's call them arbitrary customizations that any particular station might make. In general, the actual framework for and how you get the metadata into your stream and send it to us is all very similar. And at the end of the day, it's all just textual metadata. And all we really have to do is look for those key components of that metadata that you are concerned about, whether that's your ad insertion markers, your segment types, or whatever it might be for the stream that you're producing.
Gotcha.
Since it's textual, it's easy enough to just match against what we need to.
So this is fantastic. So the logger takes everything for a time period for that stream, and then what we're in here is the automated publishing. That's the demo account. What we're in here, this part is all about taking that log data and filtering it out by metadata further. So if I wanted to take 48 hours worth of data and say, this specific show, I want to output it a specific way, or every time this host is on, because they happen to be on multiple shows during the day, I want to output it a specific way. That's what this tool does, right? We're not talking about filtering what is stored, but it's Correct. First storage, second filter out into podcast.
Yes.
That's very cool.
Yeah, the way that we do that as well is by allowing you to add rule sets to your audio logger. Each rule set sort of defines an automated publishing use case. So it's the metadata you wish to target for exporting, and then potentially also the metadata you'd like to target to either automatically prune content that's within that recording period or automatically insert advertising metadata in the outputted podcast episode for whatever platform we might happen to be bound against. As example, SG Recast currently has integrations with the AdsWiz streaming platform for monetization, which is very popular in the live streaming world. But we also have currently Triton Tap podcast support. So any content in our system could be marked for insertion in either the AdsWiz world or in the Triton world. And you can plug those back in as you need to your relevant platforms.
Gotcha. So you're taking the content, identifying where the ads are, and providing the ability for another ad to be placed over it or to be removed completely.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And so when I think about this, like the content, the advertising part is great. I mean, you identify where an ad is because that's part of the metadata. That's got to also mean that it's easy to do air checks with this, right? Because you know where the ad is, and you can say, I'd like 30 seconds of content before and after it, right?
Yeah. We don't currently, I think, have any clients that are automating air checks, since for the most part, the air checks that we seem to see our clients using are for either things like profanity filter misses or say an ad spot airs that they don't necessarily have the metadata for, but they know that there was a particular break in time that they need to go back to check. And we have a manual process that allows them to do that with a waveform editor that can load in all of their segments. But generally, the automated workflows are used for actual content production in terms of podcast episodes or show archival that's automated. And air checks tend to be done more manually by our clients since they have a sort of more per client use case of how they want those air checks to get produced. That isn't necessarily always easily automated on those per case bases.
Yeah, no, there definitely are some unique requests coming from advertisers looking for that type of stuff. But this is great because it's the streaming, and then it gives you all the tools by the metadata to determine the output. And you can do it manually. It's very clear that you can do that there, but you can also set these rules. So if you have a morning show every single day, and one of the hosts on that also comes back in the afternoon to do 5 minutes to like catch people up on their drive home, you can take both of those pieces, record them, and I'm assuming through the metadata identifying the host there, you can output that into one file, one podcast effectively, right?
Yeah, it might be a little tricky if it's, if there's a very large gap between the two. If you're, say, have an 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. show and then they come back in at, say, 3 p.m., There's a
But
lot
you
of
can still
content
output it
between
to the
those two.
same. You can still output it in two separate files to be used and identified as these are the same host.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That handles a lot of the work on that end.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest question here is, because I have no experience on the streaming side, like I said, is this something that they're not logging internally that is so powerful as a third party tool? Like, is the benefit here the automatic push to make it into a podcast, or are most of these platforms not storing this stuff directly themselves?
So the most powerful component is the automated exporting. One of the big things for a number of our clients isn't necessarily that they aren't doing their logging themselves, but that logging isn't necessarily bound in any way to the metadata that was happening during their shows. And so since our tool has full access to whatever metadata was on the stream, and we keep that information sort of paired together and married at all times, it's very simple for our clients to leverage it in such a way that they wouldn't necessarily be able to if they pulled up a 6-hour wave file or whatever in their studio.
Because it's just the wave file.
And we can easily go, well, here was your segment, here is the metadata. You can search against that metadata and find things more quickly than you would necessarily in a sort of a discrete log.
Awesome. Yeah, this is very cool. Continue walking through there. Sorry to keep sidetracking. When we're digging into something new, like streaming into podcasting, at least new for me, it's really cool to think about all of the automation there, especially, for the podcast minded people, right? So everybody listening to this, if you're working with a streaming partner, if you have streaming content that you can repurpose as podcasting, like, this is very exciting for you to look at with new eyes, because that metadata is something that they look at as filling out a form, like requirements of documentation of process. On your end, it could make or break how you build a podcast. It could cut everything up exactly how you want. It could automate that process for you to make it as added segments to existing shows, as entire shows themselves. You can like Robert said, you can kick it out in a way that it automatically knows exactly where the ad breaks are. And if you're hosting with SG or Stream Guys directly, you're going to be able to automatically add ads in there. So I want everybody from a podcast focused mindset to think about it like that. And I want everybody with a broadcast mindset to super humor me on the fact that this is new.
Yes. So yeah, aside from being able to do those rule sets and being able to make sure that your content gets exported, you can also, of course, it would make sense to be able to automatically have that exported content get added to whatever podcasts you have available to your system. And that's very important for a number of our clients who, especially if they're producing multiple podcasts, say if they have a particular show that goes into an aggregate podcast that has, their full network on it, but they also have it go to a specialized podcast that's more either tailored to a specific show or is only for specific content. Our system allows for that, which is good. And then, of course, you provide any of the rest of the system information needed to make sure that you've added it to the right portion of your organization and that you might have categorized it if you needed to, and then added it to the system. Earlier, I mentioned the manual side of things. And so I'll show that very quickly just so that people have a sense of what that's like in our system. Our system makes it very simple to see the full sort of history of the segments within their recording window. And then be able to export that manually or find whatever content they want to in the system and or add market as they need to before they do that. Say, for example, if their metadata didn't happen properly for that day or something special came out that they want to make use of that's different than their normal workflow. It's very straightforward for our clients to be able to, gather whatever set of content it is that they want, be able to load that up into the platform, and then be able to mark and or cut from that whatever audio that they need to. Generally, the sort of need for the manual workflows is heavily geared towards those air checks that we were discussing earlier. And actual show production tends to lean towards the automation side of things, since it's much easier in general to say, here's where my show started and ended, and just get everything you want via metadata, rather than having to go back and do things via timing and figure out what the actual set of audio is that you want. But we still have all of that capable. So we have sort of a rudimentary DAW built into our system, a digital audio workstation, and can easily, allow a user to find the audio that they need to, and then go ahead and export that if they want as a singleton piece of content in their system, whether it's for an air check or a podcast. And of course, there's the support for doing ad insertion as you need to, or ad replacement, depending on what particular advertising backend you might have implemented in your particular SG Recast. But all of that's there to make sure that even if it's in a failover state, there's still a manual process for broadcasters to be able to use that recording window effectively.
That's really cool. Yeah, I like that. Like what I really like about Stream Guys and every time we connect is that everything you have is modular and everything you have includes the abilities for people to do manual or automated work. And that's really important because this part here isn't necessarily the primary intent. The automation of metadata from a stream to a podcast is really the main goal, and you knock it out of the park there. Like I said, the modular nature, this can work with anything, right? You can host it on Stream Guys, you can kick it out somewhere else. You can do ad monetization through you guys. So many great opportunities. But say you missed something. Say something happened like breaking news and it wasn't marked appropriately. And you need that 5-minute clip immediately for social. Well, you know generally where it was, or you know what metadata surrounded it or whatnot. If this is a tool that you are comfortable with, it's right there. It allows you to do it. It allows you to take advantage of it and get to it quickly. And that's a great feature.
Absolutely. Our clients seem to very much appreciate it. That's for sure. So the next bit that I would like to make sure we cover, since we've basically covered everything about the automation workflows and everything, is to talk about the more enterprise side of things for SG Recast. We make a very sort of concerted effort in making sure that not only are our smaller broadcasters handled appropriately, where they might only have one or a few users that access the system, but also that, sort of a multi-market, very large broadcast organization, say someone that has 70 plus or even more, maybe sometimes occasionally 300-ish radio stations, can still effectively use our system and make sure that all of that content is appropriately separated between stations or markets and that can be used effectively. And the main way that we allow for that in our system is by leveraging what we call our roles and permissions. And so every sort of instance of SG Recast that exists includes the ability for us to create not only separate users in our system, but also be able to create separate groups and then roles for those groups that allow people to use the system. So everything that is in an SG Recast, so every audio logger, every podcast episode, every actual podcast, all of them belong to a specific group in our system. And then whether or not you belong to a particular group, as long as you are somewhere in the hierarchy that has access to the content from that group and you have the right permissions, you'll be able to access or use or utilize that content as needed, either for podcasting or repurposement elsewise. And so we have quite a large number of features in the system. And so for some users, it's very important to limit sort of the exposure that any particular producer or editor or scheduler might have in the system. So say you needed to, this user, for example, is a full admin. So you can see that everything under the sun is checked. But say you had someone that you wanted to make sure could only deal with uploading content or creating or dealing with audio loggers, and you didn't want them to have any access at all to doing anything with our transcription engine or with broadcasting or with any of the other tools in the system, and all they had access to was uploading audio and or exporting audio manually or creating those automated workflows in the audio loggers. It's simple enough for those users to be created. And not only is it sort of the entire feature set that's available, you can even go as granular as sort of the subsections of each of, well, you can make them or you can edit them, but you can't actually publish from them, or maybe you can publish from them, but you can't add or edit them because you don't want a particular person messing with your configuration or your setup, but you want to make sure that if they need to, they can go in and sort of export that hot news segment or air check or whatever they need to without impacting any of the rest of the setup. All of that's flexibly doable. The key caveat is always whether or not you're in the proper group and have those proper permissions applied to you.
Because your groups are nested, right? You can create multiple layers down and multiple associations on the content on there. So it is possible for me to be part of 2 lower level groups only and have different permissions in each of them. Is that accurate? Or can I only have one role group?
So what we're working towards at the moment, you basically have all of the permissions that you've been provided on your group and everything below you. But what we're working towards is the ability to add multiple roles to a particular user from different groups.
That's
and then
cool.
You'll have the permissions from those roles in those groups. So say you have sort of producerial access to one group's content, but you only have sort of viewing privileges that you can go in and pull links to things if you need to from another group for whatever reason. That's something that we're working towards being able to allow. And at the moment, it's a little more rigid, just because it hasn't been as much of a use case yet for that.
By the way, I don't think it is actually a big use case. I tend to think that I think about enterprise and logins in a different way, because first off, I mean, the truth is, even for large organizations, if you're willing to give that person permission over one certain thing, like you got to trust them to a degree. Logging's going to help you identify to fire them? Maybe, I guess. I really don't know where that helps there. So your nested group allows things to get granular. You can either move the content around, or you can move the person's group around and accomplish those goals, right? So if you need to subsect out a certain amount of data, you just create another child group and you put that content in there. You split it in 2. If I can only have access to 2 shows and Robert can only have access to 2 shows that are under a network, well, instead of just giving us both network permission where we both have both of those, create another subsection. There's just Robert's 2 and Brian's 2, and put the shows specifically under there so that people at the network level, the level above where we are, can see all of it, and me and Robert can only see our own. The flexibility is already there. It's a fantastic addition that you're going to allow multiple role groups to be added to someone. But we should definitely check in 6 months and think if this is something that a nerd like me asks about, or if something that actually gets heavily used. But this is some of the most robust role offerings that I've seen. I guess the question is this is so granular. If I were to sign up and I needed help architecting my my logins, would you guys offer that? Like, is that included in working with you?
Yeah. Every sort of client that gets access to SG Recast gets onboarded in their own special way, depending on whatever the portions of the system are that they need, however their use cases are for needing content reimbursement or podcasting or whatever it might be. And more often than not, we're helping set up those initial roles for people, at least to get them into the system. And then if they ever really need to create new roles for new users and have sort of that larger structure and larger hierarchy as they nest things, more often than not, they'll ask at least a few questions, but it's fairly straightforward to sort of come in here. It's normally a blank slate, and you just go, yes, they have access to content, they have access to audio loggers, they have access to whatever. And more often than not, that'll get them where they need to go. And more often than not, that sort of more granular stuff is only really leveraged from our API perspective, which we can talk about next.
Yeah. So one last thing on this end, SG Recast is a subset of all the Stream Guys offerings. If I set up a role group here, is it unique only to SG Recast, or if I have if I'm signed up for multiple of your products, does my role group, does all that translate over? Do my permissions in the enterprise logins go between products?
So that is the version of reality that we're moving towards.
Love it.
There's sort of 2 ideas there that I'll briefly cover, just that people who are interested will know. And that's that right now, Stream Guys is making a large effort to create what we call our portal. And that portal will include all of the various interfaces that we've been building out for our SaaS tool sets. And then the sort of user access to those is a singleton user. And then you can even see here in our permissions that these sort of top-level user management permissions are already their own separate section from SG Recast. And there might even be a whole other separate section that we haven't talked about that's an integration with our analytics tool set that's available on this system as well. And so that modular approach that we've been working towards allows us to give you sort of one platform with any of the tools that we have that have been built into the platform, and then be able to give you the ability to manage your permissions across all of those products within one sort of hopefully simple to use interface.
Gotcha. Like any good product manager to product manager, obviously going to put you on the spot, but we'll talk in quarters. When do we think that that aggregate portal will be available for people to check out?
So it's something that we're always ever evolving. It's already in sort of the real world use at the moment with our primary concurrency tracking toolset, SG Monitor, that our clients use to keep track of their live stream listenership at any given moment. And that's sort of the first iteration of the true public portal. And over time, we will be incorporating products as we're able to into that. The biggest concern there, of course, is that right now, sort of SG Recast is a product for people. They each have their own individual SG Recast. And over time, we have to make sure that we can plug them all into one interface, but still have that nice separation between their accounts, which is our biggest concern for SG Recast. But for other products that basically are getting built from a portal perspective from the ground up, which is an initiative we've been doing for about 2 years now, it's easier to get those products enabled for sure.
This is a great segue because if I'm not mistaken, almost everything that you built is built off of an API, and this is the front end of it, correct? Mm-hmm. And so that's so killer. So everybody, the ad tech people understand. We moved to a world where like your front end is a cool, unique version of your product, but everything really should be built off of an API because it means if your UI doesn't cut it anymore, you can scrap it. The technology is still the same. Someone else can plug into it. Your clients can have their own version of it. That's where we really need to go. On the ad tech side. On the customer side, this is fantastic. What it really means is that the core technology sits separate from the visualization. And it means that if you ever decided like, hey, I really like this, I want to use it and represent it as a feature of something that I offer my clients directly. Say you want to rep a bunch of stations, affiliate stations. You can use these APIs that Robert's going to go over here. You can build your own front end. You can handle a lot of this load and combine multiple products, which I am such an advocate of at this point in the podcasting space. So let's dive over to the API because this is fantastic already. The more flexibility only makes it more exciting.
Mm-hmm. So I'll stay on this screen for the API conversation because APIs are inherently
you don't
not
have
a
any
visual component.
No, there's no interface. Well, I'm just kidding. No, you can't show me how you generate a token. No, we're good. No. But yeah, so let's go from the top level down. What do I need to do in the UI before I can stop using the UI and do everything through an API?
So there's nothing you have to do. All we do is provide you the API access. And since that's a sort of a more enterprise thing, we don't want people necessarily sort of just creating access all over the place in the UI.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we do that separately for them. So we just give you the access you need to. Our API is an OAuth 2.0 API. Which means that the access to the API is bound to a particular set of user credentials. And that is how we allow the API to have only specific access to particular features of the system that you might normally be able to access if you were logging in as that user. So every single sort of component of our system, at least as much as humanly possible. There are, of course, some graphical heavy things that might not necessarily be easily convertible to an API.
But the data that generates that graphical. And that's the big thing, right? For anybody who's not super familiar with the API, you're not going to get the UI components. You're going to get the data that powers the UI components. Yep. You're going to get all the pieces that they provide here, all the functionality, all the controls. You can set up the logging, you can set up the metadata filtering, you can set up all of that and do that through just command requests, basically. And then you could build your own UI off of it. But there's a pretty report in any platform with like pie charts and things like that. That's not what you get out of an API. What you get out of the API is the data that is then used by a UI tool for that. And you mentioned that this is based on an individual with OAuth 2.0. Does that mean that you would recommend that there is a specific person at each level and we give them we get their like API key, or should I create an individual that is solely an API key?
So it's in either case. We have people that do both.
Okay.
And that mostly depends on whether or not you have an existing sort of set of permissions on a user that you would like to make use of. Most commonly, that maybe is a smaller setup in terms of the hierarchy. So maybe they just have their main admin, and they're like, well, okay, that'll just be the person we log in as via the API to get anything, because they already have everything we need to. But for example, if you needed very limited read access to something, where you're like, okay, I need all of the podcasts from this particular set of groups to be accessible via API for either a third-party publisher that's going to integrate with it, or for your website to render stuff specially, then creating a separate user that has its own sort of API-only role that gives access just to viewing podcasts and viewing episodes, for example, and belongs to the proper location to get access to that content. That's usually more appropriate. More often than not, there's only really two use cases that people are doing with the API. And one is that sort of visualization where they're taking data from us and doing things like creating their website for, here's all of the podcasts in our network, here's how you can access each of our podcasts, here's a bunch of players or whatever else they might want to do based on that information. But the other main sort of integration is that concept of creating their own entire interface for the product, making use of whatever the functionality is from us that they don't have the time or need or want to do themselves. More often than not, that's because they have sort of an existing web CMS. Maybe their website is powered by Drupal or something, right? And they have an existing everything there, and they've been publishing their podcast directly to their website for the longest time, but they no longer wish to do that. And actually wish to do all their publishing and hosting via us. It's easy enough to take our API, plug it into that CMS so that anything that they upload or manage gets automatically synced over to our system, and they can actually get delivered and anything via or our infrastructure and our platform rather than their own website. Or, for example, if they need to do things like get their recording schedules or any of that other information and use that to render information on that web CMS side, that's also there. But those are the two biggest sort of use cases. It's either they're doing their own workflows now and they just want to add to it, or completely no longer have to develop and maintain them themselves via their own CMSs or tools, or they just need access to the data that they've been creating for so long to create their own sort of cool, fun user experiences based on those podcasts or content or whatever it might be.
But if I had, like, let's say that I had a stream, like I constantly were creating new streams, right? My company is about acquiring and collaborating with partners that are new streams, and I have my own CMS, and I add their information in there. I can automatically, at time of absorption into there, I could set the internal rules. This is their stream. This is the metadata things that they key off of and that are important. And I can use that to create that entry immediately into Stream Guys, which then follows my metadata rules to create the podcast exactly how I want. And so that means my one central location for onboarding a new broadcaster is owned by me, pushed to Stream Guys to get the exact output I want, which then can be queried by the API to pull back into my platform. And so that means that people who are doing this, right, that are the large companies that do need to display and show a unique login for themselves, this is fantastic. This is the future of ad tech, right? This concept here. Like tomorrow we're going to launch SP Recast, the Sounds Profitable Recast, where I just call this from the API and you guys can sign up. No, I'm just never want to get into that. But if you are in a big enough situation where you are considering building these tools as a company, and because you have your own front end, because you have some technology, because you have a unique value prop and a front end developer who's savvy, this is the type of thing that you want to get into. This is a feature that you want to demand of all your ad tech partners. And so that's really fantastic. I think that, reviewing this whole thing here, you built something that's very modular, has very little ego associated into it, and has the flexibility for basically anybody. And I think, that's something to be commended, right? You know what this specific tool is. It's one of many tools you guys offer. I'm very excited to have you back on in the future to talk about the rest of them. But yeah, I'm a big fan. Was there anything else that you wanted to review?
No, everything in the system is sort of another flavor of itself in some cases. So maybe the time scheduling isn't as important to go over at the moment, I think. So I think for the most part, we've covered all of the sort of the key details of how this system can help someone get their shows produced.
That's awesome. My biggest recommendation is if you are in any way working with any sort of stream that you want to turn into audio for a podcast, you should definitely reach out to SG Recast, or stream guys in general, and take a look at it hands-on. I'm sure Robert and team would be glad to take your stream, walk you through it, show you the metadata that populates, and give you some unique ideas on how to customize it. And yeah, I think that this is very cool. I think modular tech is absolutely the future. And I think that when you build things this way that are multiple features that people can pick and choose what they want off of the offering that you have total, it appeals to a wider audience. So, A+ to you guys on this. And thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.